Hooves thundered against silk carpet as the last Abbasid Caliph of Baghdad suffocated beneath layers of Persian wool. February 20th, 1258. The Mongol warriors laughed as bones cracked beneath their horses' weight. Al-Mustasim's fingers clawed at the fabric, crushing his windpipe. Gold rings scraped against wool. His lungs burned. Outside, smoke billowed from the House of Wisdom. Centuries of knowledge crackled in flames. Mathematical treatises turned to ash. Medical texts blackened and curled. The caliph who'd funded these treasures now gasped his final breaths, wrapped like cargo. Mongol tradition forbade spilling royal blood on the ground, so they'd found another way. The carpet muffled his screams. Horses circled, their breath steaming in the winter air. Each pass drove more air from the caliph's chest. The man who'd ruled from golden thrones died pressed into mud. Wine from his secret cellars still stained palace floors. Perfume from his 1,000 concubines hung thick in abandoned chambers. The empire that changed human history was dying in the most humiliating way imaginable, and the secrets buried with it were darker than anyone suspected. How did an empire that gave us algebra and modern medicine harbor rulers who sanctioned drug use and maintained 1,000-woman harems? Why did caliphs who publicly preached piety secretly drown themselves in wine and forbidden pleasures? To understand this shocking contradiction, we must peel back the palace curtains and step into the hidden world of the caliphates, starting with the discovery that would make modern scandals look tame. The wine goblet hit marble floor with a crash that could wake the prophet himself. Caliph Al-Walid II just laughed. Red liquid splashed across white stone, staining the prayer rug beneath. Servants froze. The year was 743 Damascus. In the throne room next door, religious scholars debated Islamic law. Their voices carried through cedar doors. Al-Walid poured another cup. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, from excitement. The forbidden taste made everything sharper. Musicians struck their ouds. Dancing girls swirled silk scarves through perfumed air. This scene repeated nightly in the Umayyad palace. Public prayers at dawn, secret parties after dark. The contradiction started early. The very first Umayyad caliphs built their empire on this double life. Muawiyah. I established Damascus as the capital in 661. He prayed 5 times daily in public. Behind closed doors, Byzantine wine flowed freely. Persian dancers entertained until sunrise. The palace walls held these secrets well. Thick stone muffled sounds of revelry. But servants whispered. They always whispered. Stories spread through Damascus markets like wildfire. The caliph's wine collection rivaled any Christian merchant's. His private chambers hosted poets who sang of earthly pleasures, not heavenly rewards. These early years set the pattern. Each Umayyad ruler pushed boundaries further. Yazid kept hunting dogs in the palace. He dressed them in gold collars. Religious leaders called it blasphemy. Yazid hosted more parties instead. The dogs drank wine from silver bowls while scholars raged outside. Then came the women. At first, just wives and legitimate concubines. Islamic law allowed 4 wives, unlimited concubines. But unlimited had different meanings to different caliphs. Al-Walid started collecting. Not just women. He collected their stories, their talents, their exotic origins. Ethiopian singers, Circassian dancers, Andalusian poets. The harem system was born from this collecting impulse. Not the romantic fantasy later Orientalists imagined. The real thing was stranger. Women arrived as gifts from conquered territories, tribute in human form. Some came willingly, seeking palace luxury. Others arrived in chains. All entered a world with its own rules, its own hierarchies, its own dangers. Inside the harem, power shifted like sand. The caliph's mother ruled supreme. His favorite wife commanded respect, but favorites changed. Yesterday's beloved became today's forgotten. Women learned to navigate this treacherous landscape. They formed alliances. They gathered information. They whispered secrets that could topple dynasties. Al-Walid II took these excesses to new heights. He didn't just drink wine. He bathed in it. Literally. Servants filled marble pools with vintage wines from Syria. The caliph floated naked while musicians played. He composed blasphemous poetry comparing wine to holy water, one verse survives. In wine I find the paradise promised by preachers. The palace housed two worlds. Public spaces gleamed with piety, prayer halls echoed with devotion, scholars taught Quranic interpretation. Meanwhile, underground passages led to different rooms, rooms where anything was possible, where religious law bent like heated metal, where caliphs explored every pleasure wealth could buy. These secret indulgences required management. Special servants, usually eunuchs, controlled access. They scheduled the caliph's double life, morning prayers in the mosque, afternoon governance in the throne room, evening debauchery in hidden chambers. The logistics alone were staggering. Food arrived on golden platters. Not just any food, delicacies forbidden by strict interpretation, wine-soaked meats, dishes prepared by Christian cooks, desserts dripping with alcohol-infused syrups. The kitchens operated in shifts. Day cooks prepared lawful meals. Night cooks knew different recipes. Music filled these secret hours. Not the approved religious chants, wild melodies from conquered lands, rhythms that made bodies move involuntarily, instruments considered too sensual for public performance. The oud strings vibrated with forbidden frequencies. Drums pounded out pre-Islamic beats. The palace intrigue started small, a poisoned cup here, a rival concubine there, but ambitions grew with the empire. By 740, the Umayyad Caliphate stretched from Spain to India. More territory meant more wealth. More wealth meant more excess. More excess meant more secrets to protect. Assassinations became routine, not public executions. Those followed Islamic law. These were different. Silent deaths in the night, bodies discovered at dawn, no witnesses, no trials. Just empty beds and whispered speculation. The palace guard learned to look away. Their survival depended on selective blindness. But what happened next in Damascus would make wine drinking look like child's play. The year was 744. The palace walls themselves would run red with blood, and the man responsible wore the caliph's own crown. The doors to the Majlis swung open with barely a whisper. Cedar wood, oiled daily, moved on silent hinges. Inside, voices rose and fell like waves against stone. Not prayers, arguments, heated debates that would have meant death in the public square. A Christian priest slammed his palm on the marble table. The sound echoed off vaulted ceilings. Across from him, a Muslim scholar leaned forward, eyes blazing. Between them sat a Jewish rabbi, quill scratching across parchment, recording every word. This was Baghdad, 796, the early years of the Abbasid Caliphate. Caliph Harun al-Rashid presided from his elevated seat. Gold threads in his robe caught lamplight. He listened, fingers steepled, as three faiths collided in his private chamber. The topic tonight, the nature of the soul. Tomorrow they'd debate mathematics. Next week, the movement of stars. The Majlis transformed everything. These salon gatherings weren't just discussions. They were intellectual combat zones where ideas fought for survival. The rules were simple. No topic off limits. No belief too sacred to question. No scholar too controversial to invite. The only currency that mattered was the strength of your argument. Wine helped loosen tongues. Not openly. Servants poured from ceramic jugs labeled as fruit juice. Everyone knew better. The purple stains on white beards told the truth. Even the Muslim scholars sipped between arguments. The caliph pretended not to notice. These sessions started after midnight prayers. The public mosque emptied. Guards sealed palace corridors. Then the real education began. Greek texts appeared from hidden shelves. Aristotle in Arabic translation. Plato's dialogues copied by Christian monks. Hindu mathematical treatises smuggled from Delhi. Knowledge had no religion in these rooms. The transformation happened gradually. First, just trusted advisors attended. Then scholars from conquered territories. Soon, anyone with revolutionary ideas found their way to the Majlis. Heretics became honored guests. Skeptics earned golden rewards. The more controversial your theories, the warmer your welcome. Al-Razi arrived on a humid Tuesday in 804. The physician's reputation preceded him. He questioned everything: religious dogma, ancient Greek medicine. even the Prophet's dietary recommendations. Guards almost turned him away, but Harun al-Rashid had heard whispers. This man might change everything. The Caliph's private laboratory waited 3 floors below the Majlis hall. Stone walls kept the space cool. Shelves lined with glass vessels reflected torchlight. Copper instruments gleamed on wooden tables. This wasn't decoration. Real experiments happened here, real discoveries that could reshape the world. Al-Razi's eyes widened as he descended the stairs. The smell hit first. Sharp, acidic, familiar yet different. Liquids bubbled in connected flasks. Steam rose through curved tubes. Condensation dripped into collection vessels. The Caliph's servants had built something extraordinary, a distillation apparatus unlike anything in Greek texts. "Show me what you've discovered," the Caliph commanded. His voice carried unusual excitement, not the tone of a ruler, the eagerness of a fellow seeker. Al-Razi approached the apparatus carefully. Clear liquid pooled in the final vessel. He dipped his finger, tasted. His expression changed. The liquid burned his throat, not like wine. Stronger, purer, something new entirely. Al-Razi had just tasted distilled alcohol. In the Caliph's own laboratory. Created by Muslim scientists. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The substance that would revolutionize medicine born in the heart of Islamic power. But alcohol was just the beginning. The Majlis sessions grew bolder each month. Astronomers presented models that placed the sun at the center. Mathematicians introduced concepts that wouldn't reach Europe for centuries. Physicians dissected corpses in basement rooms, all with the Caliph's blessing, all hidden from public view. The intellectual freedom attracted brilliant minds, like honey draws flies, but it also attracted something else: suspicion. Orthodox religious leaders noticed the late-night gatherings. They heard rumors of wine and heresy. They saw Christian and Jewish scholars entering palace gates. The contradiction became impossible to ignore. Some scholars pushed boundaries too far. Ibn al-Rawandi openly mocked prophets in the Majlis. All prophets. He called revelation a trick of the mind, mental illness dressed in divine clothing. The other attendees gasped. Even in this liberal environment, some lines seemed uncrossable, but the Caliph merely smiled. "Continue your argument," he said. The debates grew more extreme. Nature of God, existence of the afterlife, whether religious law applied to those who rejected religion entirely. Each session chipped away at orthodox foundations. The scholars knew they played with fire. Speaking these ideas publicly meant execution, but in the Majlis, thoughts flowed like the hidden wine. Translation projects accelerated. Not just Greek philosophy anymore. Persian Zoroastrian texts, Indian Buddhist sutras, even ancient Babylonian tablets. Every wisdom tradition found translators in Baghdad. The Caliphs funded it all. They built libraries to house the flood of knowledge. They paid scribes to copy dangerous ideas. The House of Wisdom rose from these midnight sessions. Not just a library, a research institution unlike anything before. Scholars received salaries to think, to experiment, to question. The budget exceeded some small kingdoms, all funded by an Islamic caliphate that publicly enforced religious law. Chemistry advanced fastest. The laboratory discoveries shocked even veteran natural philosophers. Acids that dissolved metals, salts that exploded in flame, substances that changed color with temperature. Each breakthrough came from mixing Islamic, Greek, Persian, and Indian knowledge. The Majlis made this fusion possible. Medicine transformed too. Al-Razi's students performed surgeries using the distilled alcohol. Wounds stayed clean. Patients survived procedures that previously meant death. They wrote detailed observations, created medical encyclopedias, all while orthodox preachers condemned them for impiety. The intellectual explosion couldn't stay hidden forever. Stories leaked from palace walls. Servants whispered about the heretical discussions. Guards spoke of foreign scholars and wine-stained manuscripts. Baghdad's conservative population grew restless. They sensed their world changing, old certainties dissolving like salt in water. Political implications emerged slowly. If scholars could question religious truth in the Majlis, what about political authority? If Greek logic trumped revealed scripture, where did that leave caliphal legitimacy? The very discussions that enriched human knowledge undermined the foundations of Islamic rule. Some caliphs recognized the danger. They tried to limit topics, restrict attendance, control the flow of wine and ideas, but momentum had already built. Scholars addicted to intellectual freedom found ways around restrictions. Secret sessions continued in private homes. The genie had escaped its bottle. By 833, the situation reached a breaking point. Caliph al-Ma'mun made a fateful decision. He would bring Majlis ideas into public policy. The Mihna Inquisition began. Scholars faced interrogation about their beliefs. Not orthodox beliefs, rationalist beliefs. The tables had turned completely. Now, religious judges had to defend literal interpretation. Rationalist philosophers held inquisitorial power. Those who insisted on traditional readings faced imprisonment. The intellectual revolution born in secret chambers burst into daylight. Blood would flow in Baghdad streets, brother would betray brother. The Majlis had succeeded too well. Ideas meant for midnight debate became state doctrine. Philosophy designed for elite minds was forced on common believers. The balance that kept the caliphates stable started tilting dangerously. What started as intellectual curiosity became political weapon. Behind palace walls, the original Majlis continued, but the atmosphere had changed. Scholars watched their words more carefully. The free flow of wine and ideas slowed to a trickle. Everyone understood the stakes now. These weren't just theoretical discussions. People died for these ideas. Empires rose and fell on these arguments. Yet the damage was already done, or perhaps the progress. Depending on your view, the translated texts spread across the Islamic world. The medical discoveries saved countless lives. The mathematical concepts revolutionized astronomy. The philosophical arguments would echo through centuries, all born from those forbidden midnight gatherings. The legacy proved double-edged. Islamic civilization reached unprecedented heights of learning, but the same openness that enabled discovery also introduced doubts. Doubts about religious authority, doubts about political systems, doubts that would eventually contribute to the caliphate's downfall. The ideas born in these rooms would either elevate humanity or destroy the caliphate from within. And in the palace dungeons, another kind of society was taking shape, one where the normal rules of civilization ceased to exist entirely. The screaming stopped at midnight. Another brother dead, another rival eliminated, another step closer to the throne. In the Abbasid palace of 833, succession meant survival. The Caliph's 50 sons understood this mathematics perfectly. Blood pooled beneath the cedar door. Servants pretended not to see the dark liquid seeping into hallway stones. They stepped around it, eyes averted, carrying silver trays to other chambers. The body inside would disappear before dawn. It always did. By morning prayers, even the bloodstains would vanish. Only whispers would remain. Prince Ahmad pressed his ear against his chamber wall. Stone carried sound better than air in these ancient corridors. He counted his remaining brothers. 32 left. Last week there had been 35. The algebra of succession was simple. Fewer brothers meant better odds. His own dagger rested beneath silk pillows. Down the corridor, feminine laughter bubbled through latticed windows. The harem quarters never slept. 1,000 women filled 3 palace wings. Not metaphor, actual census. The eunuch accountants kept precise records. 900 concubines, 90 wives, assorted daughters, sisters, aunts, each one a potential ally or enemy in the succession game. The women understood power better than any general. They'd learned it young. Circassian girls arrived at 12, Ethiopian beauties at 14, Persian poets barely passed their first blood. The harem swallowed them whole. Those who adapted survived. Those who didn't became cautionary whispers in the bathhouses. Sultana Zainab ruled this feminine empire with iron wrapped in silk. The Caliph's mother had outlived 3 sons. She'd orchestrated the deaths of 2. Now she groomed her grandson for the throne. Her apartments occupied the entire 4th floor, Windows overlooked both the execution courtyard and the garden where princes played. The symbolism wasn't subtle. She summoned her grandson at the second prayer call. Prince Harun climbed marble stairs, each step measured. His mother had died mysteriously last month. Poisoned dates, the physicians whispered. Now grandmother would shape his education. He was 7 years old. Already he'd watched 2 uncles strangled with silk scarves. "Your brother Ahmad plots against you," Zainab announced without preamble. Her voice carried the certainty of one who'd survived 4 caliphs. "His mother meets with the palace guards nightly." The child nodded solemnly. In this palace, 7-year-olds learned assassination before arithmetic. His tutors included a master poisoner from Damascus, a strangler from Cairo, a knife expert who'd served the Fatimids. Traditional subjects like poetry came later. First, survival. The harem trained its own assassins, women who could kill with hairpins, who knew which perfumes masked deadly toxins, who could seduce information from any man. These skills passed from mother to daughter like heirloom jewelry, more valuable than gold, more necessary than beauty. Competition started in the communal baths. Steam rose from heated pools while women sized up rivals. New arrivals faced immediate sorting. Pretty fools became playthings. Clever beauties earned education. The truly exceptional might mother princes. Each category brought different dangers. The concubines developed their own hieroglyphics, messages written in henna patterns, warnings encoded in jewelry arrangements, alliances signaled through silk color choices. The eunuchs understood but stayed neutral. Their survival depended on serving whoever currently held power. Food became weapon and shield. Every meal potentially lethal. Taste testers died weekly. The kitchen staff rotated constantly. Trust meant sharing from the same plate. Refusing food meant declaring war. The dining protocols rivaled any military strategy. Children grew up breathing this poisoned air. Prince and bastard alike learned to recognize the smell of arsenic in honey, the shimmer of ground glass in wine, the bitter aftertaste that meant tomorrow would never come. Paranoia became survival instinct. Harun's education accelerated after his uncle's death. Grandmother Zainab supervised personally. Morning lessons covered traditional caliphate history. Afternoon sessions taught practical applications, how the Umayyads eliminated rivals, where the early Abbasids hid bodies, which poisons left no trace. The palace architecture itself taught lessons. Secret passages honeycombed the walls. Hidden chambers allowed private meetings. Acoustic tricks let certain rooms function as listening posts. Survival meant memorizing every hidden door, every escape route, every potential ambush point. Assassination attempts came like seasonal rains, expected but still dangerous. Harun survived 3 before his 8th birthday. Poisoned sweets from a jealous aunt, a cobra in his bed linens. A archer who missed by inches during garden games. Each attempt strengthened his position. Survivors earned respect. The women competed through their sons. A successful prince meant elevation for his mother. A dead prince meant relegation to the forgotten wings. Mothers coached sons in murder while teaching them to tie their turbans. The contradiction never registered. This was simply palace life. Some concubines chose different strategies. Intelligence over assassination. They cultivated networks spanning the entire caliphate. Letters arrived hidden in silk bolts. Information flowed through merchant caravans. A concubine might never leave the harem, but her web stretched from Cordoba to Samarkand. The smartest women avoided producing princes entirely. Daughters brought different opportunities, less deadly competition, more marriage alliances. A well-placed daughter could secure her mother's position for decades. Several concubines mysteriously birthed only girls. The midwives kept their secrets. Entertainment masked darker purposes. Poetry recitations concealed threat assessments. Musical performances covered whispered conspiracies. Dance exhibitions distracted while assassins moved through shadows. Every pleasure had sharp edges in this gilded cage. The eunuchs navigated between factions like ships between reefs. Castrated as children, they existed outside normal power structures, neither fully male nor female. Trusted with harem secrets yet forbidden from dynasty building, their unique position made them invaluable intermediaries. Chief eunuch Masrur controlled more information than any vizier. He knew which prince visited which concubine, who met secretly in the garden pavilions, where the bodies were buried. Literally, his archive contained enough scandal to topple the caliphate. He burned selected documents weekly, maintaining the balance of terror. Medical knowledge served multiple purposes. Physicians who delivered princes also provided abortifacients. Herbs that eased childbirth could cause miscarriage in different doses. The same hands that healed also harmed. Hippocratic oaths meant nothing behind harem walls. Wet nurses held special power. They raised future caliphs from birth, shaped their earliest memories. A devoted nurse could protect her charge better than any guard. A corrupted nurse could destroy a dynasty with poisoned milk. The selection process rivaled choosing generals. By age 10, Harun had systematically eliminated 5 brothers. Not personally. Grandmother Zainab handled logistics, but he chose targets and methods. Each death moved him closer to succession. Ahmad still lived, protected by his mother's guard connections. That problem required special handling. The harem's 1,000 women generated endless intrigue. Shifting alliances created new dangers daily. Yesterday's friend became today's threat. Trust lasted exactly as long as mutual benefit. Everyone understood the rules. Play or be played. Kill or be killed. Rise or disappear. Sexual politics added another layer. The Caliph couldn't possibly visit 1,000 women. Favorites received attention. Others waited years between summons. Neglected wives grew desperate. Forgotten concubines plotted revenge. The economy of desire created its own violence. Some women found alternate satisfactions. Carefully, secretly, the eunuchs weren't entirely incapacitated. Palace guards could be bribed. Visiting merchants disappeared into private chambers. Discovery meant death, but loneliness drove women to extraordinary risks. The children born from these liaisons faced unique challenges. Obviously not the Caliph's offspring, yet raised in the palace, living proof of their mother's crimes. Some mothers killed these infants immediately. Others raised them as weapons for future revenge. The bloodlines grew impossibly tangled. Ramadan brought special tensions. Religious observation clashed with survival needs. Fasting weakened defenses. Night prayers provided assassination opportunities. The holy month saw more deaths than any other. Piety became another mask for murder. The palace maintained its own economy. Not just gold and silk. Information traded at higher premiums. A whispered secret could buy protection. The right rumor could destroy enemies. Women who mastered this currency ruled from behind veils and walls. Harun's final test came during his 12th year. Grandmother Zainab presented the challenge simply: Ahmad dies tomorrow, or you do. No more protection, no more guidance. The prince must act independently or perish. The lesson had always pointed toward this moment. The boy considered his options through the night. Direct assassination seemed crude. Poison felt predictable. He needed something that would send a message. Something that would establish his reputation among the surviving brothers. By dawn he'd made his choice. Ahmad's death shocked even hardened palace veterans. But one caliph's method of eliminating rivals was so disturbing, even his own guards refused to speak of it. The execution order sat unsigned on his desk while the caliph secretly funded the heretic's research. The paradox defined Al-Mamun's reign: death sentence in one hand, gold coins in the other. The year was 830. Baghdad's intellectual revolution had reached its crisis point. The philosopher waited in an underground chamber 3 levels beneath the throne room. No windows, one door. Stone walls sweated moisture in the afternoon heat. Ibn al-Rawandi knew his writings deserved death. Every religious authority agreed. His books mocked prophets. All prophets: Moses, Jesus, Muhammad. He called them clever deceivers or deluded madmen. Yet here he sat, counting gold dinars from the caliph's treasury. The coins clinked against marble table, payment for his next treatise, the one that would question whether God needed to exist at all. The caliph, who publicly enforced religious law, privately sponsored its destruction. Footsteps echoed down the spiral stairs. The philosopher's hand moved toward his knife. Even protected guests died mysteriously in palace depths. But the footsteps belonged to a friend. Another court philosopher, Al-Warraq, carried wine and troubling news. "The orthodox faction grows stronger," he whispered. Wine splashed into copper cups. "They demand your head." The caliph wavers. The two men drank in silence. Both understood the game. Al-Mamun needed their ideas to modernize his empire. But he also needed religious support to maintain power. The balance shifted daily. Yesterday's protected thinker became tomorrow's executed heretic. Above them, the caliph wrestled with impossible choices. His own beliefs had evolved through years of secret study. The rational theology of the Mu'tazila school appealed to his intellect. God acted according to logic. Justice preceded divine commands. Human reason could determine right from wrong. Revolutionary ideas that challenged traditional Islam, but forcing these beliefs on his subjects had backfired spectacularly. The Mihna Inquisition turned philosophers into inquisitors. Common believers faced interrogation about abstract theology. Those who insisted on literal Quranic interpretation faced imprisonment, torture, death. The intellectual revolution had become tyranny. In the palace library, banned books multiplied like locusts, not destroyed, preserved, studied. The Caliphs' collection included every heretical text in existence: Gnostic Gospels, Manichaean scriptures, Zoroastrian prophecies, even atheist treatises, all carefully catalogued by nervous librarians who prayed 5 times daily to prove their orthodoxy. The translation movement accelerated beyond control. Greek philosophy had opened doors that couldn't close. Aristotle's logic dissected religious claims. Plato's ideals challenged Islamic law. Epicurus whispered that gods didn't care about human affairs. Each translated page weakened traditional foundations. Medical discoveries created new theological problems. Dissection revealed no soul residing in the heart. Mental illness responded to drugs, not exorcism. Physical causes explained mystical experiences. The physicians who made these discoveries still prayed publicly. Privately, doubt gnawed at their certainty. Al-Mamun's predicament worsened each day. His rationalist policies alienated traditional Muslims, but abandoning them would betray everything he believed. The middle ground had vanished. Blood stained Baghdad streets as theological disputes turned violent. Brothers killed brothers over the nature of God's attributes. Secret societies formed in response. The Ikhwan al-Safa, Brothers of Purity, met in hidden locations. They synthesized Greek philosophy, Islamic mysticism, and scientific observation. Their encyclopedic letters circulated underground. Each text pushed boundaries further. Mathematics became mysticism. Astronomy revealed divine patterns. Chemistry unlocked creation's secrets. The Caliph knew about these groups. His spies attended their meetings. Some spies became believers. The ideas were too powerful to resist. Once exposed to logical analysis of religious claims, few returned to simple faith. The infection spread through educated classes like plague. In the palace depths, Ibn al-Rawandi continued writing. His latest work dissected the concept of prophecy, not attacking individual prophets anymore, questioning the entire mechanism. How could God communicate with humans? Why choose some and not others? What distinguished revelation from hallucination? Each question cut deeper than swords. The Mu'tazila theologians who once seemed radical now appeared conservative. They still believed in God, prophecy, afterlife, just interpreted differently. But the philosophers went further. Some questioned everything. Others built elaborate systems that relegated God to distant first cause. Practical atheism dressed in theological language. The Caliph's own brother led the orthodox resistance. Al-Mu'tasim commanded the Turkish Guard. Soldiers who cared nothing for philosophy. They wanted simple faith and generous pay. The intellectual debates meant nothing to men who lived by the sword. They saw heresy weakening the empire, making men question authority, undermining military discipline. Letters arrived daily demanding action. Provincial governors reported unrest. Traditional scholars preached rebellion. The common people felt confused, angry, abandoned. Their simple faith had sustained them through conquest and plague. Now intellectuals told them their beliefs were childish. The resentment boiled over into violence. Al-Ma'mun made desperate compromises: public orthodoxy, private free thought. But the division proved unsustainable. Philosophers couldn't hide their contempt for traditional beliefs. Orthodox preachers couldn't ignore palace-funded heresy. The center could not hold. The Ismaili underground offered a different path. They didn't reject religion. They reinterpreted it completely. Every verse had 7 levels of meaning: the surface level for common believers, hidden depths for initiates. Their Da'i missionaries spread across the Caliphate, teaching secret doctrines that transformed Islam into mystical philosophy. These networks operated with remarkable discipline. Cell structures prevented infiltration, code words identified fellow believers, safe houses sheltered traveling teachers. The Caliph's intelligence services knew they existed but couldn't penetrate their security. Every arrested member died rather than reveal secrets. Their ultimate goal remained mysterious. Some whispered about overthrowing the Abbasid Caliphate. Others claimed they sought to transform Islam from within. Their libraries contained texts that would shock even palace philosophers, writings that decoded Quranic verses into astronomical observations, that found Greek philosophy hidden in Arabic poetry. The intellectual ferment attracted foreign observers. Byzantine theologians visited Baghdad. Indian mathematicians debated Muslim astronomers. Jewish philosophers found unprecedented freedom. Christian physicians shared knowledge with Islamic counterparts. The city became humanity's classroom, but the lessons taught there threatened every established order. In his final years, Al-Ma'mun recognized his failure. The rationalist revolution had spiraled beyond control. Instead of strengthening Islam through reason, he'd weakened it with doubt. The orthodox backlash would sweep away his reforms. His successor would end the Mina, burn the philosophy books, execute the freethinkers. But ideas, once released, couldn't be recaptured. The translated text spread to Spain, Egypt, Persia. The philosophical questions echoed in madrasa debates. The scientific methods transformed medicine and mathematics. The damage was done, or the progress made. History would judge. Ibn al-Rawandi vanished one night. His chamber stood empty. Books remained, gold untouched. No body ever surfaced. Some claimed the Caliph finally signed the execution order. Others whispered about escape to India. The truth mattered less than the legend. The philosopher who questioned everything, protected by the Caliph, who enforced orthodoxy. The underground movements learned from this period. They went deeper, communicated through symbols only initiates understood, built power slowly, secretly, patiently. The Ismaili networks that would eventually birth the assassins, the mystical orders that would preserve Greek philosophy through orthodox persecution, the medical schools that would continue scientific research under religious camouflage. What they discovered about the nature of power would eventually tear the Islamic world apart. But first, another caliph would push the boundaries of excess so far that his own guards would turn away in disgust. Dawn prayers echoed through Baghdad while the caliph hadn't slept, not from devotion, but from the wine still coursing through his veins. Gold goblets littered the marble floor. Silk cushions bore stains that servants would scrub away before the muezzin's second call. The smell of frankincense barely masked sharper odors: sweat, wine, something else the morning breeze couldn't clear. Caliph al-Mutawakkil stumbled toward his prayer mat. 851, the height of Abbasid power. His hands shook as he performed ablutions. Water splashed across mosaic tiles. Each drop sounded like thunder in his wine-soaked skull. In 3 hours, he would lead Friday prayers before thousands. Right now, he could barely stand straight. Musicians still played in the corner. Their fingers moved mechanically across oud strings. They'd been performing since midnight. Eyes glazed, voices hoarse. The caliph paid triple rates for those who could last until dawn. Most collapsed by the 3rd hour. These survivors knew their worth. Through latticed windows came the sounds of Baghdad waking. Merchants opened stalls. Children recited Quranic verses in nearby madrasas. The faithful prepared for communal worship. None suspected their spiritual leader currently wore silk robes stained with wine and worse. The contradiction had become so routine, even the palace guards stopped noticing. This double life started early in al-Mutawakkil's reign. Public piety came first. He reversed his predecessor's rationalist policies, burned philosophy texts, persecuted Mu'tazila theologians, restored Orthodox Islam to official favor. The common people cheered their defender of faith. Behind palace walls, different appetites demanded satisfaction. The transformation happened after dark. Prayer beads became wine cups. Quranic recitation gave way to Persian love poetry. The same voice that condemned music in daylight begged for louder drums at midnight. Hypocrisy elevated to art form. Each public condemnation matched by private indulgence. His poetry competitions became legendary for all the wrong reasons. Not the refined verse of earlier caliphs. These sessions dripped with earthly desire. Poets competed to compose the most scandalous lines. Winners received gold. Losers often received worse. The caliph's tastes grew darker as his reign progressed. One winner's verse survived in secret manuscripts. Your lips promise paradise while your hands drag me to beautiful hell. The caliph rewarded him with 100 dinars, then ordered his public flogging for blasphemy. The poet understood. This was the game. Private reward, public punishment. The whip marks healed. The gold remained. Female poets faced special challenges. They arrived veiled in propriety. They left disheveled in ways that went beyond metaphor. Those who pleased the caliph gained influence. Those who disappointed vanished into the night. The morning prayer call often found new verses scattered among wine cups and torn silk. The musicians learned to read his moods. Wrong tempo meant dismissal. Right rhythm meant rewards. They developed a repertoire for every stage of intoxication. Gentle melodies for the first cup. Thunderous beats by the 10th. By dawn, only the strongest instruments survived. Broken drums littered the performance space like battlefield casualties. Turkish dancing boys added another layer of scandal. Al-Mutawakkil imported them from Central Asian markets, trained in movements that would make courtesans blush. Their performances went far beyond entertainment. The orthodox scholars he publicly supported would have demanded execution for what happened in those pre-dawn hours. Yet every morning, the transformation reversed. Servants arrived with practiced efficiency. Wine cups vanished into hidden compartments. Musicians disappeared through secret passages. Incense burned away evidence. Fresh robes replaced stained silk. By the time the caliph emerged for morning prayers, no trace remained of the night's excesses. The public saw only their pious defender. Al-Mutawakkil prayed with visible devotion. He wept during Quranic recitation. He donated generously to religious schools. He ordered stricter enforcement of Islamic law. The contradiction never seemed to trouble him, as if two different men inhabited the same body. His treatment of religious minorities reflected this duality. Publicly, he imposed harsh restrictions. Christians and Jews wore identifying patches. Their churches and synagogues faced demolition. Orthodox Muslims praised these measures, but privately, the caliph's physician was Christian. His favorite poet was Jewish. His most trusted musician practiced Zoroastrianism. These minorities understood the game better than anyone. Daylight meant submission. Darkness brought different rules. The Christian physician who treated the caliph's wine headaches publicly wore humiliating yellow patches. The Jewish poet who composed his private verses couldn't legally testify in court. Yet both accumulated wealth that would have shocked their oppressed communities. The harem reflected similar contradictions. Al-Mutawakkil publicly promoted modest dress for women. His edicts required full covering in public spaces. Yet his private quarters housed dancers who performed nearly naked. The same girls who couldn't show their faces in daylight displayed everything else after dark. One concubine left a remarkable account, hidden in Ottoman archives. She described the schizophrenic existence, days spent in enforced piety, memorizing Quranic verses, wearing multiple layers of silk, then midnight transformations, costumes that mocked modesty, dances that celebrated the flesh, all for a caliph who preached public virtue. His wine collection defied belief. Thousands of amphoras filled underground cellars, vintages from every corner of the known world, Byzantine wines, Persian vintages, even forbidden wines from Christian monasteries. The variety suggested obsession beyond mere indulgence. He collected wines like scholars collected manuscripts. Special servants managed this liquid treasury. They understood subtle differences between regions and years. They knew which wines paired with which moods. Their knowledge would have impressed any sommelier. Yet officially, they didn't exist. The cellar records listed the contents as vinegar and medical supplies. The poetry he composed during these sessions revealed the inner conflict. One surviving fragment: "I am the guardian of faith who dreams of its destruction." Another: "My public prayers are performances. My private sins are worship." The verses suggest awareness of his own hypocrisy, perhaps even reveling in it. His sons witnessed these contradictions daily. They learned to navigate between public father and private monster. The lessons shaped a generation of princes who saw religious law as theatre, useful for controlling masses, irrelevant for those with power. This cynicism would poison the caliphate's future. By 855, the excesses reached new extremes. Al-Mutawakkil no longer bothered hiding his drinking from inner circle members. Wine flowed during state dinners. Musicians performed during religious festivals. The boundaries between public and private began dissolving. Dangerous territory for any ruler. His advisors warned about growing discontent. Orthodox supporters felt betrayed by rumors of palace debauchery. Rationalists remained angry about their persecution. Military commanders worried about discipline collapse. The caliph's response was more wine, more poetry, more forbidden pleasures. The contradictions created a special kind of madness. Men who lived double lives eventually lost track of which was real. The mask became the face became the mask. Al-Mutawakkil seemed to exist in a permanent state of intoxication, not just from wine, from the power to be multiple people simultaneously. His final poetry competition took place 6 days before his death. The theme: divine hypocrisy. Poets competed to compose verses about gods who broke their own commandments. The winner created lines so blasphemous, even the drunk caliph hesitated before rewarding him. But gold changed hands. It always did. What happened next shocked even the Turkish guards who'd seen everything. December 856. The details were so disturbing that chroniclers wrote in code. Modern historians still debate what actually occurred in that final debauch. Some things were too dark for even secret histories. But one caliph took these contradictions so far, his own son would expose him in the most brutal way. The year was 861. The palace halls would run with different liquids than wine, and the man who ordered it wore his father's blood like baptism. Messengers arrived hourly with news of new conquests. Territories the caliph couldn't even pronounce, let alone control. Sind, Transoxiana, Ifriqiya. Names that meant nothing in Baghdad's throne room. Each victory announcement echoed through marble halls, while the real power slipped through imperial fingers like sand. The year was 749. The Abbasid Caliphate stretched from the Atlantic to the Indus. Maps covered entire palace walls. Scribes updated boundaries daily. New cities appeared. Old kingdoms vanished. The empire grew faster than information could travel. A governor might rule for months before Baghdad even knew his name. In Damascus, a man named Abd al-Rahman declared himself emir. Not caliph, not yet, just emir. The title seemed modest enough. The reports reaching Baghdad described a loyal administrator. They lied. Abd al-Rahman had already stopped sending tax revenues, already minted coins without the caliph's image, already built an army that answered only to him. The treasury ministers noticed first. Gold shipments from Syria decreased, then stopped. Excuses arrived instead. Bandit raids, administrative delays, temporary shortages. Each letter perfectly reasonable. Each one another link in the chain of rebellion. By the time Baghdad understood, Damascus might as well have been on the moon. Distance created its own sovereignty. A fast messenger needed 6 weeks from Baghdad to Cordoba, 3 months round trip. In that time, entire dynasties could rise. The Umayyad prince who fled to Spain discovered this beautiful truth. He carved out an emirate while the caliph waited for reports. By the time orders arrived to stop him, he commanded 30,000 swords. The caliph's rage shook palace foundations. He ordered immediate military response. Generals nodded. Armies marched. Then reality set in. Supply lines stretched beyond breaking. Local populations supported their nearby rulers, not distant Baghdad. Soldiers deserted to join provincial armies that paid better. The mighty Abbasid military machine ground to a halt in desert sand. In Egypt, another transformation unfolded. The governor there played a subtler game. He sent tribute, proclaimed loyalty, praised the caliph in Friday prayers, while secretly building a parallel government. His own judges, his own tax collectors, his own construction projects. Cairo rose from sand without Baghdad's permission or knowledge. Letters between provinces bypassed the capital entirely. The governor of Ifriqiya negotiated directly with Andalusian emirs. Persian administrators formed alliances with Central Asian strongmen. A shadow caliphate emerged, connected by trade routes and family marriages, united by their distance from Baghdad's reach. The postal system itself became unreliable. Official messengers disappeared. Some joined provincial courts. Others sold information to the highest bidder. Letters arrived, opened, edited, or not at all. The caliph's commands became suggestions by the time they traveled 1,000 miles. Local rulers learned to interpret creatively. In Samarkand, the situation grew worse. The governor there hadn't sent reports in 2 years. Rumors trickled back through merchant caravans. He'd married into local nobility, converted his Arab garrison to local customs, built palaces that rivaled Baghdad. Some whispered he'd even abandoned Arabic for Persian in official documents. The caliph dispatched investigators. They never returned. More investigators followed. They sent back glowing reports of loyalty and efficiency. Too glowing, clearly written under duress. The smart ones defected immediately. The stubborn ones ended up in Samarkand's expanding dungeons. Or worse. Each province developed its own character. Andalusia became a beacon of culture. Egypt focused on trade. Persia maintained ancient traditions. Central Asia mixed Islam with older beliefs. The unified caliphate existed only in Baghdad's imagination. Reality spoke a dozen languages, followed different laws, worshipped in subtly different ways. Military expeditions meant to restore order made things worse. Armies lived off local populations, pillaged the very provinces they came to save. Local rulers positioned themselves as protectors against Baghdad's exploitation. Popular support shifted. The caliph's soldiers found themselves fighting entire populations, not just rebellious governors. In the palace, ministers presented increasingly creative reports. They showed maps with firm boundaries, listed provinces sending regular tribute, described governors who proclaimed undying loyalty. The lies grew more elaborate as reality diverged further. No one wanted to tell the caliph his empire existed mainly in archived correspondence. Secret negotiations flourished in distant capitals. The Byzantines dealt directly with Syrian emirs. Indian kingdoms signed treaties with Persian governors. The Franks sent ambassadors to Cordoba, not Baghdad. The diplomatic world adjusted to new realities faster than the caliph could issue denunciations. Local dynasties emerged overnight. The Aghlabids in Ifriqiya, the Tulunids in Egypt, each claiming to rule in the caliph's name, each completely independent. They minted coins with tiny caliphal inscriptions, mentioned Baghdad in Friday prayers, maintained the fiction while building their own empires. Currency told the real story. Provincial coins grew larger while caliphal images shrank. Local governors promoted themselves from tiny inscriptions to central portraits. Some dropped Baghdad references entirely. The economic independence preceded political declarations. Money spoke louder than loyalty oaths. In Khorasan, something darker stirred. Reports spoke of new religious movements, black banners appearing in mountain villages, preachers denouncing both the caliph and local governors. They promised a purified Islam, a return to prophetic simplicity. Their message spread through provinces like wildfire through dry grass. The Caliph's intelligence network collapsed from the edges inward. Spies switched sides. Double agents became triple agents. Information grew so unreliable that truth became indistinguishable from fabrication. Ministers started believing their own propaganda. The palace existed in an information bubble, floating above an empire that no longer answered its calls. Provincial armies evolved independently. Spanish Muslims developed different tactics than Egyptian forces. Persian cavalry looked nothing like Arabian traditions. Each region adapted to local enemies, local terrain, local resources. The unified military structure fractured into dozens of regional forces with conflicting loyalties. Cultural drift accelerated the separation. Andalusian Arabic incorporated Spanish words. Persian Muslims maintained Zoroastrian festivals. Egyptian Islam absorbed Coptic traditions. The unified religious culture Baghdad promoted dissolved into regional variations. Scholars worried about heresy. Politicians worried about loyalty. Both concerns proved justified. In the throne room, the Caliph still received victory announcements. Conquests in lands he'd never see. Submission from governors who ruled like kings. The ceremonies continued. The fiction maintained. Everyone pretended the empire remained whole while its pieces drifted apart like islands in an expanding sea. By 750, the Caliph controlled little beyond Iraq. Real power resided in provincial capitals. Damascus, Cairo, Cordoba, Samarkand. Each city claimed legitimate succession from the Prophet. Each ruler styled himself the true guardian of Islam. The multiplication of authorities confused believers and enriched local strongmen. Merchants adapted fastest. They paid taxes to whoever controlled the trade routes, switched loyalties at borders, carried multiple diplomatic passes. Business thrived in the chaos. The economic integration the caliphate created survived its political fragmentation. Gold flowed even as armies clashed. Religious scholars faced impossible choices. Which ruler deserved their loyalty? Who held legitimate authority? The questions that once had clear answers now provoked violent debates. Some declared all current rulers illegitimate. Others endorsed whoever paid their salaries. The religious unity that justified the caliphate cracked along provincial lines. In distant Cordoba, Abd al-Rahman finally declared himself caliph. Not emir, not governor, caliph, equal to Baghdad. The theological impossibility became political reality. Two men claimed Muhammad's succession. The cosmic order that allowed only one legitimate ruler shattered. If two caliphs could exist, why not 3 or 10? The news took months to reach Baghdad. By then, other provinces were considering similar declarations. The pandemic of independence spread faster than any plague. Each successful rebellion encouraged others. The empire that conquered half the known world couldn't maintain its own borders. The rot spread from periphery to center. In Baghdad itself, neighborhoods developed autonomous governance. The caliph controlled the palace. Maybe. Different quarters answered to different authorities. Merchant guilds, religious leaders, military commanders. The fragmentation reached the empire's heart. The center could not hold because there was no center. Tax revenues plummeted. Provincial tribute stopped arriving. The palace treasury emptied. The caliph, who once funded mankind's greatest libraries, couldn't pay his own guards. The Turkish soldiers who maintained order started looking for better employers. Their loyalty lasted exactly as long as their salaries. Infrastructure crumbled without central maintenance. Roads that connected the empire fell into disrepair. Bridges collapsed. Canals silted up. The physical arteries of empire clogged while its political heart grew weaker. Communication between provinces required increasingly dangerous journeys through ungoverned spaces. The irony cut deep. The very success of the early caliphate enabled its dissolution. Good roads allowed rebellious armies to march quickly. Unified language let conspirators communicate across vast distances. Shared religion provided legitimacy for rival claims. The tools of empire became instruments of its destruction. By 755, the fiction collapsed entirely. The Caliph controlled Baghdad. Sometimes, on good days, provincial rulers didn't even bother with courtesy tributes. They ruled openly as independent monarchs. The Abbasid Caliphate existed in name only, a ghost empire haunting the palace where it was born. Yet in that same palace, the Caliphs continued their extravagant lifestyles. Wine cellars remained full while the treasury emptied. Poets competed while provinces rebelled. The disconnect between palace fantasy and imperial reality reached psychotic proportions. The rulers who lost an empire still lived like they commanded the world. The empire was too big to control, and in one distant province, something was stirring that would bring everything crashing down, not just another rebellion, something darker. Something that would transform the very meaning of Islamic authority. The black banners gathered in mountain fortresses. The recruiters whispered in market squares. The storm approached while Baghdad's caliphs drank themselves into oblivion, unaware their world was already ending. The proclamation crackled through makeshift speakers across the dusty Syrian camp. Static, mixed with Arabic words that made hardened jihadists pause mid-prayer. Abu Isa al-Rifai had just declared hashish not only permissible, but recommended for his fighters. The year was 1993. The location, a compound outside Aleppo that would soon become the strangest chapter in modern caliphate history. Cigarette smoke curled through the command tent where Abu Isa held court, not regular cigarettes. The sweet smell gave away their contents. Former smugglers turned holy warriors passed joints between discussions of Sharia law. The contradiction didn't bother their leader. He'd found Quranic justification for everything. The verse interpretations would have made classical scholars weep. His followers called him Prince of the Faithful. Others used different names. The Hashish Caliph, the Mad Mullah of Aleppo. Even other extremist groups kept their distance. When men who videotaped beheadings considered you unstable, you'd crossed lines nobody knew existed. The transformation from drug smuggler to religious leader happened gradually. Abu Isa started in the Bekaa Valley, moving product between Lebanon and Syria. Border guards knew him by reputation. Then came the religious awakening. Not the kind that made men abandon vice, the kind that made them sanctify it. His first followers were fellow smugglers seeking redemption without reformation. They wanted paradise but couldn't quit their trade. Abu Isa offered the perfect solution. He declared their smuggling routes sacred paths. Their product became holy sacrament. Their criminal network transformed into religious brotherhood. The theological gymnastics required to justify drug dealing as jihad would have impressed medieval scholars. Abu Isa quoted obscure hadith about consciousness-altering substances. He reinterpreted verses about wine to exclude other intoxicants. His followers memorized these arguments like prayers. They needed them when recruiting. Money flowed through the operation like water through broken dams. Drug profits funded weapons purchases. Weapons attracted fighters. Fighters needed drugs to maintain courage. The cycle fed itself. Within months, Abu Isa commanded 300 men, each one sworn to defend his unique interpretation of Islam. The compound grew daily. New tents appeared each morning. Refugees from conventional jihadi groups arrived seeking Abu Isa's permissive theology. Men tired of strict commanders who forbade everything. Here they found a leader who sanctified their vices, paradise through pleasure instead of deprivation. Training sessions mixed military drills with theological lectures. Morning runs followed by Quranic recitation. Weapons assembly interrupted by hash breaks. The fighters moved between activities in chemical hazes. Their accuracy suffered, but morale soared. They laughed through exercises that made other groups grimace. Abu Isa's personal habits set the standard. He consumed more product than he sold. Morning prayers came after wake and bake sessions. Strategic planning happened through clouds of smoke. His eyes stayed permanently bloodshot. Followers claimed this showed spiritual intensity. Critics saw only intoxication. The intelligence reports reaching Damascus described something unprecedented. A militia funded by drug money was normal in civil war. A religious movement that sanctified drug use was not. Syrian intelligence officers struggled to categorize the threat. Criminal organization or terrorist group? The answer was both and neither. His sermons attracted curious crowds and horrified observers. Abu Isa preached that traditional Islam had been corrupted by prohibitions. The Prophet, peace be upon him, never specifically banned hashish. Medieval scholars added these restrictions. True believers should return to original freedoms. The logic had enough twisted coherence to confuse uneducated followers. Women arrived at the compound despite its reputation, or because of it. Some sought protection in wartime chaos. Others felt attracted to Abu Isa's promises of earthly pleasure preceding heavenly reward. The gender dynamics in a drug-sanctioning caliphate created situations nobody anticipated. Traditional rules bent until they broke entirely. The marriage ceremonies defied description. Mass weddings where bride and groom exchanged vows through smoke clouds. Dowries paid in hashish bricks. Wedding nights that violated every traditional custom. The female followers adapted to this strange reality or fled at first opportunity. Those who stayed developed their own interpretations of Abu Isa's theology. Communications with other jihadi groups deteriorated rapidly. Even extremists have standards. When Taliban commanders condemn your methods, you've entered uncharted territory. Abu Isa didn't care. He declared them all apostates for rejecting God's botanical gifts. His isolation became theological badge of honor. The compound's daily routine revolved around drug consumption. Dawn prayers followed by morning smoke. Midday training punctuated by hash breaks. Evening lectures delivered by an increasingly incoherent leader. Night watches where sentries saw visions instead of enemies. Military discipline collapsed into chemically induced chaos. Local farmers faced impossible choices. Abu Isa's men paid well for food and shelter, but association brought targeting from other factions. The hashish militia controlled valuable smuggling routes. Cooperation meant protection. Resistance meant violence performed by men too high to show mercy. Most chose survival through collaboration. The children in the compound witnessed scenes that defied categorization. Armed men teaching Quranic verses between joint passes, military training mixed with agricultural lessons about cannabis cultivation. Young boys learned to strip rifles and roll cigarettes with equal skill. Their education prepared them for a world that shouldn't exist. International observers struggled to process reports from the compound. UN monitors wrote carefully worded assessments. Journalists risked visits, but found the reality too strange for mainstream consumption. The stories that emerged sounded like fiction. A caliphate where morning prayer included mandatory drug use, where religious police distributed hashish instead of enforcing prohibition. Abu Isa's writings from this period survive in fragmentary form. Rambling treatises mixing Quranic quotation with smuggler's wisdom. Theological arguments that started coherent but dissolved into chemical confusion. His followers treated these texts as scripture. They memorized passages that made sense only through altered consciousness. The economy of the compound operated on multiple levels. Traditional drug smuggling continued, protection rackets expanded. But everything was wrapped in religious justification. Taxes became zakat. Smuggling became sacred commerce. Violence became holy struggle. The criminal enterprise wore theological costume. Recruitment accelerated as Syria's civil war intensified. Men seeking meaning found Abu Isa's message appealing. Fight for God while enjoying earthly pleasures. Paradise, now and later. The sales pitch worked on those exhausted by strict jihadist discipline. The compound's population swelled past 1,000. The drug cultivation expanded beyond hashish. Opium poppies appeared in protected fields. Captagon production started in hidden labs. Abu Isa justified each addition through creative scripture interpretation. His followers accepted every explanation. Critical thinking vanished in chemical smoke. The original hashish focus became gateway to pharmaceutical chaos. By late 1993, even hardened criminals found the compound's activities disturbing. Drug dealers who'd seen everything encountered scenes that shocked their limited morality. Religious ceremonies that incorporated substance consumption. military operations planned by men who couldn't stand straight. The merger of crime and faith created monstrous hybrid. Intelligence agencies monitored the situation with fascinated horror. Here was something genuinely new, not just corruption or hypocrisy, full integration of vice into religious framework. Abu Isa hadn't just permitted drugs, he'd made them sacramental. The theological implications terrified traditional scholars across all denominations. His speeches grew more incoherent as consumption increased. Followers recorded rambling sermons that jumped between topics like scattered radio stations, one moment discussing irrigation techniques, next moment declaring himself heir to the Abbasid Caliphs, then detailed instructions for hash preparation. The connections existed only in his deteriorating mind. The compound's defensive preparations reflected its leader's paranoia. Guard posts manned by fighters too stoned to aim straight. Perimeters marked by men who saw threats in shifting shadows. Weapons cached by people who forgot locations. The military structure existed, but functioned through luck more than skill. Food shortages hit as winter approached. Abu Isa's solution shocked even loyal followers. He declared fasting obsolete. Hunger was Satan's weapon against true believers. Hashish provided all necessary sustenance. The theological reasoning involved creative calorie calculations. Fighters grew gaunt while their leader insisted they'd never been healthier. The first defections began quietly. Men slipping away during night watches, families disappearing between morning prayers. Those who left spread stories that strained credibility. A caliphate where drug use was mandatory, where traditional Islamic law dissolved in smoke, where the leader claimed direct revelation through cannabis consumption. Regional commanders from other factions held emergency meetings. Something had to be done about Abu Isa. His existence embarrassed their cause, made all jihadists look insane by association. Even groups that rarely agreed found common ground. The Hashish Caliphate had to end. Plans formed in secret councils. Abu Isa sensed the growing isolation. His sermons took apocalyptic turns. The world would end soon. Only his followers would survive. Protected by their chemical enlightenment, traditional Muslims would perish for rejecting God's herbs. The compound prepared for final battles that existed mainly in their leader's mind. Supply lines started failing, not from enemy action, from supplier reluctance. Even career criminals hesitated to enable Abu Isa's vision. The compound's needs had grown beyond simple hashish. The shopping lists read like pharmaceutical encyclopedias. Dealers who'd supply anyone drew lines at the Hashish Caliph. Internal discipline collapsed entirely. Followers interpreted Abu Isa's permissiveness as license for anything. Traditional hierarchies dissolved. Women demanded equal access to sacramental substances. Children sampled products meant for adults. The ordered society promised by Caliphate transformed into anarchic commune. The final months witnessed scenes that defied comprehension. Dawn prayers where participants couldn't stand. Military drills performed in slow motion. Theological debates that dissolved into giggling fits. The compound resembled psychiatric ward more than military base. Yet Abu Isa insisted they were building new Islamic golden age. His last recorded sermon mixed prophecy with product reviews. Different hashish strains possessed different spiritual properties. Afghan indica brought visions of paradise. Lebanese sativa enhanced Quranic understanding. The faithful must sample widely to achieve full enlightenment. Followers took notes that read like dealers' catalogues. Security collapsed as paranoia peaked. Everyone suspected everyone. Fighters accused each other of stealing personal stashes. Abu Isa ordered executions for theological crimes that existed only in his mind. The violence came in waves, triggered by supply shortages or particularly potent batches. The end came from unexpected directions, not military assault or intelligence operation, simple entropy. The compound consumed itself from within, followers too impaired to function, leaders too paranoid to lead, infrastructure crumbling from neglect. The Hashish Caliphate died not from enemy action, but from its own contradictions. Abu Isa vanished one December morning. Some say he overdosed in his tent. Others claim he escaped to Lebanon. A few insist he achieved chemical transcendence and entered paradise directly. The truth mattered less than the legend. The man who sanctified drugs in God's name, who built a caliphate on cannabis foundations. The compound emptied within days. Followers scattered to other groups or civilian life. Most never spoke of their time with Abu Isa. The embarrassment ran too deep. They believed something too strange for explanation, participated in history's most bizarre religious experiment. Intelligence files on the Hashish Caliphate remain classified across multiple countries. The implications disturb analysts even decades later. If someone could build religious movement around drug use, what other perversions were possible? The precedent haunted security services, made them watch for similar mutations. The site itself returned to farmland. Local farmers avoid certain fields, say the soil still smells of hashish, that prayers echo from abandoned bunkers. Children are warned away from ruins where strange plants grow wild. Physical traces fade, but memories linger like smoke. Modern jihadist groups never mention Abu Isa. His name brings uncomfortable silence. Even extremists need boundaries, lines that shouldn't be crossed. The Hashish Caliph crossed them all, made mockery of everything they claimed to represent. His existence challenges their legitimacy through sheer absurdity. Yet in dark web forums, his writings circulate. Young men, frustrated by strict interpretations, discover his permissive theology. The ideas spread like spores, waiting for suitable conditions. Another chaos, another leader willing to sanctify vice. The Hashish Caliphate died, but its concepts achieved strange immortality. But Abu Isa's strangest decree wasn't about drugs at all. The order that made even his followers pause came during his final weeks, written in shaking hand between consumption sessions. The words that proved too much even for men who'd accepted everything else. The proclamation that finally shattered his authority involved something nobody expected. The steel door clanged shut with finality that echoed through stone corridors. Another Muslim Brotherhood leader disappeared into Egypt's prison system. 1954. Cairo's Tura prison would soon witness something Egyptian authorities never anticipated. The prisoners they meant to break would build something stronger than walls could contain. Behind rusted bars, whispers traveled faster than guards' footsteps. New arrivals brought fragments of information from the outside world. Political prisoners huddled in corners, sharing news through coded phrases. The Brotherhood's leadership might be scattered across different prisons, but their ideas moved like water through cracks. Nothing stayed isolated in Tura's crowded cells. Sayyid Qutb adjusted to darkness that first night. The intellectual who'd studied in America now occupied a cell barely large enough to lie down. Cockroaches skittered across damp floors. The stench of unwashed bodies mixed with overflowing latrines. This sensory assault would have broken lesser men. Qutb saw opportunity where others saw only suffering. Morning brought unexpected structure. Guards expected chaos among political prisoners. Instead, they found organized prayer lines. The Brotherhood members had already elected prayer leaders, assigned cleaning duties, established teaching schedules. The prison within a prison took shape before authorities understood what was happening. By the time they recognized the pattern, roots had already spread deep. The hierarchy emerged naturally from shared suffering. Senior brothers commanded respect through their torture scars. Younger members earned position through memorization of texts. Everyone understood their place without formal announcement. Guards watched nervously as prisoners moved with military precision during exercise periods. These weren't broken men shuffling through routines. Something else was forming in Tura's shadows. Communication between cell blocks required creativity. The Brotherhood developed their own Morse code using clanging pipes. Laundry lines carried messages written in urine. Sympathetic guards, bribed with promises of future rewards, passed letters between sections. The network grew stronger with each passing week. Prison walls meant to isolate instead created intense bonds. Qutb's writings began in those first months. Not on paper initially. Paper was forbidden. He composed entire chapters in his mind. Fellow prisoners memorized sections like Quranic verses. Each man carried pieces of text that would later become milestones. The book that would reshape radical Islam was born in whispered fragments between torture sessions. Ideas survived where bodies broke. The guards noticed changes they couldn't explain. Prisoners who should have been demoralized showed strange confidence. Men returned from interrogation rooms with serene smiles. The typical prison dynamics reversed. Instead of breaking spirits, confinement seemed to strengthen resolve. Reports to Cairo described something unprecedented: a shadow government operating within prison walls. Educational programs started without official permission. Mathematics lessons in the exercise yard, history lectures during mealtimes, Quranic interpretation that went far beyond traditional boundaries. The Brotherhood created their own university behind bars. Degrees weren't printed on paper, but carved into memory. Graduates emerged more dangerous than when they entered. The medical network revealed the organization's sophistication. Brotherhood doctors, imprisoned for their politics, established informal clinics. They treated wounds from interrogation sessions, set bones broken by guards, even performed minor surgeries with smuggled instruments. The state meant to punish found itself hosting a parallel healthcare system. Prisoners trusted Brotherhood medics more than official prison doctors. Food distribution followed Islamic principles the state had abandoned. The strong shared with the weak. The healthy fasted so the sick could eat. Resources flowed according to need, not privilege. Guards accustomed to fostering competition between prisoners watched in confusion. These men acted like family members, not inmates. The bonds transcended tribal and regional differences. Secret trials convened after midnight prayers. Not official proceedings. Brotherhood justice for those who violated their strict codes. Informants faced judgment from peers who knew every detail of their betrayals. The sentences varied: social isolation, denial of protection. In extreme cases, accidents during shower time. The shadow state enforced its own laws, while Egyptian authorities focused on external control. The poetry that emerged from Tura's cells would inspire generations, verses comparing prison bars to the strings of celestial instruments, metaphors transforming torture rooms into spaces of spiritual purification. Each line memorized and transmitted orally. The aesthetic dimension of resistance took forms the authorities couldn't suppress. Beauty flourished in the ugliest circumstances. Young recruits arrived weekly, students arrested during protests, workers caught distributing pamphlets. They entered confused and terrified. Within days, the Brotherhood's reception committee had assessed their skills, assigned them mentors, integrated them into the hidden structure. The prison became a recruitment and training center more effective than any free organization. The economic system defied prison norms. Cigarettes typically served as currency in detention. The Brotherhood introduced something different: labor credits based on service to the collective. Teaching earned credits. So did cleaning, medical care, spiritual guidance. The shadow economy operated on principles that would make socialists envious, yet it was built on religious foundations. Ramadan transformed the prison atmosphere. Guards dreaded the holy month. Not because prisoners caused problems. The opposite. The discipline displayed during fasting hours unnerved authorities, hundreds of men moving in perfect coordination, breaking fast at exactly the same moment. The synchronization revealed an organization that transcended physical barriers. Walls couldn't contain what was happening. The library existed everywhere and nowhere. No central collection. Books were banned. But every Brotherhood member carried texts in memory. One might have memorized all of Bukhari's hadith. Another preserved Ibn Taymiyyah's writings. Together, they reconstructed Islamic scholarship from human hard drives. Study circles formed where men recited from memory, while others transcribed from recitation. Marriage ceremonies happened despite regulations, not official unions. Spiritual contracts between prisoners and women they'd never meet. Sisters and daughters of other inmates. The Brotherhood maintained these connections through elaborate letter systems. Men planned futures from solitary confinement. Families formed through prison walls. The human need for connection found ways around every restriction. The technological adaptations impressed even the guards. Prisoners built radio receivers from bed springs. created ink from burned bread mixed with oil, fashioned surgical instruments from sharpened spoons. Each innovation spread through the network within days. The collective intelligence of hundreds of educated men focused on resistance produced remarkable results. External events filtered through in distorted forms. Nasser's Arab nationalism, the Suez Crisis, regional upheavals. The Brotherhood interpreted everything through their developing ideology. Prison isolation created an echo chamber where ideas grew more extreme without external moderation. What entered as political news exited as theological revelation. The transformation happened gradually but inevitably. Guard corruption became systematic, not random bribes. Organized penetration of the prison administration. Brotherhood members identified guards with financial problems, family difficulties, religious inclinations. They offered solutions, loans without interest, prayers for sick children. Gradually, the watchers became the watched. Some guards informed the Brotherhood about planned raids before telling their supervisors. The women's section developed parallel structures. The Brotherhood's female members created their own shadow systems. Their methods differed, but the goals aligned. They smuggled messages through children during visits, maintained morale through smuggled cosmetics and fabrics. Even in gender-segregated detention, the organization maintained unity. The authorities had imprisoned a movement, not just individuals. Physical fitness became resistance. The Brotherhood instituted mandatory exercise regimens, not just for health, for preparation. Every member understood that prison was temporary. The struggle would continue outside. Bodies broken by torture rebuilt through disciplined training. Men who entered weak emerged hardened. The prison meant to destroy them became their forge. The intellectual production never stopped. Theological treatises, political analyses, military strategies, all developed in the shadows of Tura prison, smuggled out page by page, reconstructed in safe houses across Egypt. The ideas that would topple governments decades later were refined in cells meant to silence dissent. Isolation became incubation. Dreams took on special significance. In the sensory deprivation of solitary confinement, visions came frequently. The Brotherhood developed systems for interpreting these experiences. Shared dreams indicated divine approval. Nightmares warned of betrayal. The psychological pressure of imprisonment created altered states that reinforced ideological commitment. Suffering became proof of righteousness. The children who visited carried more than family news. They memorized messages, learned hand signals. Some as young as 7 became couriers in the shadow network. The guards saw touching family reunions. The Brotherhood saw communication channels. Every embrace transferred information. Every kiss conveyed instructions. The innocence of children became operational cover. Medical emergencies revealed the shadow state's efficiency. When a brother suffered heart failure, the response was immediate. Prisoner doctors converged from different blocks. Medicines appeared from hidden caches. The informal hospital operated better than some official facilities. Lives were saved through collective action, while guards stood helplessly watching. Their prison contained another institution they couldn't control. The theological evolution accelerated in confinement. Ideas too dangerous for public discussion flourished in closed circles. Qutb's concept of Jahiliyyah, modern society's pre-Islamic ignorance, the obligation to overthrow corrupt governments. These notions moved from theoretical to actionable. Prison debates became revolutionary doctrine. The echo chamber amplified every radical interpretation. Escape attempts took unexpected forms, not digging tunnels or scaling walls, escaping mentally while bodies remained confined. The Brotherhood created imaginative exercises, detailed visualizations of future victories, mental maps of post-revolution Egypt, psychological freedom that no cell could contain. Men learned to live simultaneously in prison and in their envisioned futures. The arts flourished despite material deprivation. Calligraphy using burnt matches on cloth, sculptures from soap and bread, musical compositions tapped on walls. The aesthetic dimension of faith found expression in every available medium. Guards confiscated physical artifacts but couldn't stop the creative impulse. Beauty emerged from brutality like flowers through concrete. Power struggles within the Brotherhood reflected external politics. Different factions competed for influence: the scholars versus the activists, the mystics against the rationalists. These tensions created dynamic debates that refined ideology. Prison democracy operated through consensus building. Decisions emerged from exhaustive discussion. The process trained future leaders in negotiation and compromise. The economic planning went beyond prison walls. Detailed strategies for post-release employment, business networks to support freed brothers, investment plans using hidden assets. The shadow state planned its transformation into a parallel society. Every detail considered during endless prison nights. The meticulous preparation would shock Egyptian intelligence when eventually discovered. Psychological warfare flowed both directions. Guards tried to break prisoners through isolation and torture. Prisoners responded by converting guards to their cause. The battle for hearts and minds played out in daily interactions. Small kindnesses that disarmed hostility, dignified responses to humiliation, the moral high ground claimed through behavior rather than words. The succession planning began early. Qutb knew he might not survive imprisonment. He trained multiple successors. Each carried different aspects of his vision. The redundancy ensured ideological survival regardless of individual fates. The movement's future was encoded in numerous minds. Killing leaders would only multiply their influence. News of other prisons filtered through the network. Similar shadow structures in Alexandria, Port Said, Aswan. The Brotherhood's prison system spanned Egypt like underground routes. Coordination happened through transported prisoners, transferred guards, smuggled communications. The authorities had created a national network by dispersing Brotherhood members. The unintended consequence would haunt Egypt for decades. Technology transfer accelerated between facilities. Innovations from one prison spread rapidly. New communication methods, improved concealment techniques, medical procedures. The collective learning created standard operating procedures. The Brotherhood's prison manual, never written down, existed in thousands of memories. Standardization made the shadow state more efficient than the official one. The cultural production shaped generations. Songs composed in solitary confinement became anthems. Poetry from death row inspired revolutionary fervor. Stories of prison martyrs created mythology. The cultural output transformed suffering into glory. Young men volunteered for imprisonment to join this brotherhood of the detained. Prison became pilgrimage. International connections developed through foreign prisoners, Palestinian militants, Syrian Islamists, Pakistani scholars. The prison became an international conference of radical movements. Ideas cross-pollinated between different struggles. Strategies adapted from various contexts. The Brotherhood's Egyptian experience became template for global movements. Tura prison accidentally hosted terrorism's university. The guards' reports grew increasingly alarmed. The shadow state wasn't weakening. It was professionalizing, developing bureaucracies, creating institutions, establishing traditions. What started as emergency adaptation became sophisticated governance. The authorities faced a dilemma. Harsh crackdowns created martyrs. Leniency allowed organization. Every response strengthened the Brotherhood. Release dates became graduation ceremonies. Brothers emerged with advanced degrees in revolution. Networks intact. Ideology reinforced. Skills sharpened. The prison meant to neutralize threats had become an academy. Alumni spread across Egypt carrying identical training. Coordinated without central command, the authorities had created their own worst nightmare. The documentation system rivaled intelligence agencies. Every guard's weakness recorded, each informant identified, architectural details memorized, operational patterns analyzed. The Brotherhood's intelligence on their captors exceeded official files. They knew shift schedules, family situations, financial vulnerabilities. The watched had become the watchers. Information asymmetry favored the prisoners. Religious innovation flourished in confinement. New prayer practices for confined spaces. Fasting regimens adapted to prison food. Ablution methods using minimal water. The practical adaptations became spiritual innovations. Prison Islam developed unique characteristics, more austere, more disciplined, more revolutionary. The constraints created distinctive religious expression. The philosophical developments would reshape Sunni thought. Qutb's writings moved beyond traditional scholarship. He created new categories, redefined classical concepts. His prison productions would influence movements from Southeast Asia to North Africa. The intellectual work accomplished in a cell would echo through decades. Ideas bred in darkness would emerge into blazing daylight. Communication with the outside evolved constantly. New codes developed as old ones were discovered. The language of resistance grew more sophisticated. Double meanings layered into innocent letters. Children's drawings contained military intelligence. Love poems encoded operational instructions. The authorities needed linguistics professors to decode prisoner communications. Even then, meanings remained elusive. But what they planned in those cells would explode across the Middle East within a decade. The graduates of Tura prison would topple governments, inspire revolutions, transform Islam itself. The shadow state built behind bars would emerge to challenge every government in the region. The seeds planted in darkness would bloom into forces that would reshape the modern world. Egypt had imprisoned men, but incubated a movement that would outlive states and dynasties. The screen flickered to life at exactly midnight. Another execution video, another victim kneeling in orange jumpsuit against desert backdrop. But this broadcast carried something different. The masked figure holding the knife wore a microphone. His words streamed live to smartphones across 3 continents. Medieval brutality choreographed for social media algorithms. The production quality rivaled Hollywood studios. Multiple camera angles captured every detail. Professional editing maintained tension. The victim's final words subtitled in 12 languages. Graphics identified his supposed crimes against the Caliphate. Everything designed for maximum viral spread. The 7th century meeting the 21st in ways nobody had imagined possible. Behind encrypted servers, the recruitment machinery hummed constantly. Not crude propaganda posters, slick promotional videos with Hollywood production values, teaser trailers for upcoming attacks. Behind-the-scenes footage showing daily life under ISIS rule. Content creators who understood modern attention spans. The Caliphate's media department employed more editors than soldiers. Twitter accounts proliferated faster than authorities could shut them down. Each fighter maintained multiple profiles. Coordinated hashtag campaigns trended globally. Supporters shared execution videos like movie trailers. The platform meant for sharing breakfast photos became a recruitment tool for humanity's darkest impulses. Silicon Valley's algorithms couldn't distinguish between cat videos and beheadings. The contradictions multiplied daily. Ultra-conservative ideology preached through liberal technology platforms. Men who claimed to reject modernity uploaded content through satellite internet. Warriors who denounced Western corruption used Western cameras, Western software, Western distribution networks. The irony escaped them completely. Or perhaps they understood perfectly. Use the enemy's tools against him. Telegram channels buzzed with encrypted communications. Operational planning mixed with theological discussions. Bomb-making tutorials sat beside Quranic interpretations. New recruits received welcome packages containing prayer schedules and IP scrambling software. The dark web became their underground railroad, moving fighters virtually before physically. Digital borders proved easier to cross than geographic ones. In Rucka's internet cafes, a stranger scene unfolded. Young men uploaded selfies from the Caliphate capital, posing with weapons, flashing victory signs beside captured tanks. The same generation that documented every meal now documented holy war. Instagram stories from the front lines, Snapchat messages that disappeared after viewing, perfect for operational security. The female recruitment required different strategies. Closed Facebook groups promised sisterhood and purpose. Romantic narratives about strong warriors needing supportive wives. Photos of sunset weddings in Syrian compounds. They cropped out the destroyed buildings, filtered the images to hide the dust and blood. Paradise looked lovely through Valencia filters. Cryptocurrency transformed their financial operations. Bitcoin donations flowed from sympathizers worldwide, untraceable, instantaneous, converting digital currency to weapons and supplies. Traditional banking systems became obsolete. The blockchain enabled terrorism in ways bin Laden never envisioned. Anonymous supporters funded atrocities with mouse clicks. Gaming platforms provided unexpected communication channels. Fighters coordinated through Call of Duty voice chat. Minecraft servers hosted recruitment meetings. The same teenagers fragging each other in virtual battles received invitations to real warfare. Game mods featured ISIS flags and Nasheed soundtracks. The line between play and reality dissolved pixel by pixel. The contradictions deepened with each innovation. Salafist preachers who condemned photographs live-streamed sermons. Warriors who forbade music produced Nasheed albums with auto-tune. The digital caliphate operated by different rules than the physical one. Online personas crafted for maximum appeal. Real-world brutality hidden behind careful editing. YouTube became their film school. Militants studied Hollywood action sequences, analyzed what made videos go viral, tested different thumbnail strategies. The metrics mattered more than the message. View counts determined success. Engagement rates shaped strategy. They optimized content for the algorithm's preferences. Bloodshed packaged for maximum reach. The hacktivists arrived next. Tech-savvy jihadists who could code as well as they could shoot, defacing government websites, stealing military databases, doxing opposition figures. The cyber caliphate operated parallel to the physical one, sometimes more effectively. Servers proved easier to capture than cities. But beneath the digital sophistication, paranoia flourished. Every follower potentially tracked by intelligence services, every upload risking drone strikes. The technology that enabled their reach also exposed their positions. Metadata became death sentences. Geotagged photos guided missiles. The tools of expansion became instruments of destruction. The rules constantly evolved to address security concerns. No photos showing identifiable landmarks. Voice modulation for all recordings. Background checks for new social media managers. The operational security grew more complex than the operations themselves. Protecting the propaganda machine required more resources than actual fighting. Children raised in the caliphate learned technology before theology. iPad apps teaching Arabic letters and bomb construction, programming classes preparing future cyber warriors. Their education blended medieval ideology with modern skills, creating a generation equally comfortable with smartphones and swords. The fusion produced something unprecedented. Western recruits brought Silicon Valley expertise. Former programmers built encrypted communication apps. Marketing professionals crafted recruitment campaigns. The brain drain worked in reverse. Educated individuals abandoning comfortable lives for Syrian deserts. Their skills transformed amateur hour into professional operations. The dating apps adapted for jihadi matchmaking shocked even hardened intelligence analysts. Tinder for terrorists. Profile photos showing masked fighters. Interests listed as Sharia law and martyrdom. Women swiping right on warriors they'd never meet before marriage. The algorithm matched based on ideological compatibility. Modern technology serving ancient customs. Virtual reality entered the recruitment arsenal. Immersive experiences of life under the caliphate, walking through digital Raqqa markets, attending virtual military training. The technology meant for gaming became indoctrination tool. Potential recruits experienced jihadi life from their bedrooms. Some never realized when virtual became real. The financial technology evolved rapidly. Initial coin offerings for terrorist projects, crowdfunding campaigns for specific operations, smart contracts automatically releasing funds upon completion of attacks. The intersection of blockchain and bloodshed created possibilities that challenged every counterterrorism framework. Intelligence agencies struggled to keep pace. Traditional infiltration meant nothing in digital spaces. Algorithms flagged keywords but missed coded language. The terrorists innovated faster than defenders could adapt. Each platform shutdown spawned 3 alternatives. The digital hydra grew new heads faster than authorities could cut them. Local populations lived between 2 worlds. Physical checkpoints enforcing medieval law, digital devices connecting them globally. The MISMO technology that broadcast executions also enabled resistance. Encrypted messages coordinating escapes. Hidden cameras documenting atrocities. The surveillance state surveilled by its subjects. The collapse began online before manifesting physically. Recruitment videos attracted fewer views. Donation streams dried up. Social media companies finally coordinated bans. The digital infrastructure crumbled platform by platform. Territory could be defended with weapons. Server space required corporate cooperation. When tech companies united, the digital caliphate suffocated. But the innovations outlived their creators. Encrypted communication methods spread to other groups. Recruitment strategies copied globally. The digital DNA of ISIS infected movements worldwide. Destroying the caliphate didn't destroy its online legacy. The ghost in the machine persisted after the machine stopped. The servers seized by coalition forces revealed the operation's scope. Terabytes of propaganda, recruitment databases, financial records, communication logs. The digital archaeology exposed networks spanning continents, names, addresses, plans. The virtual caliphate's corpse provided intelligence goldmines. Dead websites yielding living conspirators. Inside those drives, investigators found something else. Folders labeled insurance. Files that made seasoned analysts pause. The biggest secrets weren't about operations or finances. They concerned the foreign intelligence connections, the supposed enemies who'd secretly enabled operations, the government officials who'd turned blind eyes for personal profit. Evidence that would rewrite the narrative of Syria's war, but their biggest secret wasn't in their videos. It was in what they were desperately trying to hide. The insurance files contained names that would shock the world. Government ministers from supposed enemy nations, intelligence officers who'd facilitated operations, business leaders who'd profited from the chaos. The digital caliphate had kept receipts on everyone. Their final weapon wasn't a bomb or a bullet. It was blackmail material that could destabilize governments across 3 continents. The encryption keys scattered among senior leaders, some captured, some killed. Some vanished into civilian populations carrying civilization-ending secrets in their heads. The race to recover these keys would define the Shadow War's next chapter, because inside those files lay proof that the caliphate's enemies and enablers were sometimes the same people. And that revelation would make their execution videos look tame by comparison. The pattern emerged like blood through bandages. Every fallen caliph, every collapsed dynasty, every empire that crumbled from within, they all shared the same fatal flaw. Not weakness, not external enemies, something far more insidious. The contradiction at the heart of absolute religious power. Start with the Umayyads in Damascus. Wine flowing behind prayer halls, the very men who enforced prohibition drowning in vintage wines, moved to the Abbasids in Baghdad. Secret laboratories distilling alcohol, while public executions punished drinkers. The pattern repeats, grows stronger, each caliphate pushing the contradiction further until it snapped their foundations like overloaded bridges. The mathematics were simple. Absolute power corrupted. Religious absolute power corrupted absolutely while claiming divine sanction. The combination created a special kind of madness. Men who believed themselves God's representatives on earth, immune to the laws they enforced on others. The psychological pressure of maintaining that fiction eventually shattered every dynasty. Consider what the Majlis revealed. Intellectual freedom flourishing in midnight shadows, while orthodox enforcement ruled the daylight. The human mind rebels against such divisions. Scholars who spent nights questioning everything couldn't maintain daytime faith. The knowledge they gained in secret poisoned their public personas. Split personalities became institutional policy. The succession battles followed predictable patterns too. Brothers murdering brothers while invoking divine will. Mothers poisoning rivals' children in God's name. The harems became slaughterhouses decorated with silk and perfume. Each death justified through creative theology. When murder becomes sacrament, civilization's foundations dissolve. The palace corridors that heard both prayers and death screams eventually echoed with only silence. Physical distance accelerated the process. Governors who ruled like kings in far provinces, creating their own dynasties while claiming caliphal authority. The lie worked until someone else claimed the same divine mandate. 2 caliphs meant no caliphs. The theological impossibility became political reality. Once that barrier broke, nothing prevented infinite multiplication of authority. Modern technology simply updated ancient patterns. ISIS broadcasting medieval brutality through fiber optic cables, using Western platforms to denounce Western civilization. The contradiction reached absurd heights. Silicon Valley algorithms spreading 7th century ideology. The fusion created something monstrous that couldn't sustain itself, just like wine-soaked prayer mats, just like secret laboratories, just like everything else. The Islamic State's digital infrastructure revealed the pattern's latest iteration, fighters using encrypted apps while banning internet for civilians. Leaders hiding behind VPNs while executing people for watching videos. Technology became another forbidden fruit consumed by those who forbade it. The hypocrisy was structural, built into the system's core code. Every caliphate created shadow institutions that eventually consumed the legitimate ones. The Abbasids' secret societies, the Umayyads' hidden pleasure chambers, ISIS's digital networks. These parallel structures started as survival mechanisms, became power bases, finally transformed into the only reality that mattered. The shadows swallowed the substance. Prison networks showed the pattern in miniature. The Muslim Brotherhood building states within states, creating hierarchies that mocked official structures. The Egyptian government thought they were containing a threat. Instead, they incubated a virus that would spread through every institution. The prison became the template. Shadow governance, more effective than legitimate rule. The theological gymnastics required to justify these contradictions eventually exhausted even true believers. You can only reinterpret scripture so many times, bend meanings until they break, claim divine sanction for obviously human desires. The intellectual dishonesty corroded faith from inside, leaving hollow men ruling hollow empires, pretty facades concealing rotted foundations. Look at the succession mechanisms. The prophet left no clear instructions. That ambiguity poisoned 14 centuries. Every claimant found justification for their authority. Every usurper discovered divine approval after the fact. When God's will becomes whatever the powerful want, the concept loses all meaning. The sacred became a tool for the profane. Women in these systems faced impossible choices. The harems that promised protection became prisons. The marriages that should have created alliances became warfare by other means. Mothers trained sons for murder. Daughters became pawns in games they couldn't refuse to play. The family structure that Islam meant to protect transformed into its greatest weakness. The economic contradictions proved equally fatal. Wealth flowing to rulers who preached simplicity, palaces rising while subjects starved, treasury gold funding private pleasures while public infrastructure crumbled. The mathematics of greed don't change. Whether counting dinars or dollars, Bitcoin or bullion, the hoarding instinct that builds empires eventually destroys them. Intelligence networks turned inward. Spies watching spies watching spies. Information becoming currency more valuable than gold. Every secret a potential weapon. The surveillance systems meant to protect rulers became their greatest threat. When everyone knows everything about everyone, traditional power structures collapse. Blackmail replaced governance. The cultural production tells the same story. Poetry praising what scripture forbade. Art depicting what law banned. Music celebrating what orthodoxy condemned. Human creativity refuses confinement. The stricter the prohibition, the more elaborate the violation. Cultural expression found ways around every restriction until the restrictions themselves became meaningless. Military structures reflected the same decay. Armies loyal to commanders, not caliphs. Soldiers fighting for pay, not principle. The monopoly on violence fragmenting into competing factions. Each general, a potential usurper. Each victory, a step towards civil war. The forces meant to expand empire turned inward, consuming what they were meant to protect. The educational system split personalities further. Morning lessons teaching orthodoxy, evening sessions exploring heresy, students learning to live in multiple realities simultaneously. The human mind isn't designed for such compartmentalization. Eventually, one worldview dominates, usually the one that offers more freedom, more possibility, more truth. Religious authority itself became the greatest casualty. When caliphs violated every principle they preached, the principles lost meaning. When religious police took bribes, law became negotiable. When scholars justified any behavior for sufficient payment, theology became prostitution. The moral authority that legitimized rule evaporated like morning mist. The foreign connections accelerated dissolution. Byzantine wine in Damascus palaces, Greek philosophy in Baghdad libraries, Western technology in ISIS compounds. Each outside influence weakened internal cohesion. The pure Islamic state never existed, never could exist. Human societies are porous. Ideas flow like water. Attempts to dam the flow only create pressure that eventually bursts through. Modern communications made the contradictions impossible to hide. Where once palace walls contained secrets, now smartphones broadcast everything. The caliphs' wine cups appeared on Instagram. The harem dynamics played out on WhatsApp. The execution videos that meant to terrorize instead revealed the executioners' weaknesses. Their masked faces couldn't hide their Amazon wish lists. Every caliphate thought itself different, special, blessed, immune to history's patterns. The Umayyads believed their Arab nobility protected them. The Abbasids trusted their Persian bureaucracy. ISIS thought modern technology gave them advantages. All fell to the same internal contradictions, the same human weaknesses, the same structural impossibilities. The recruitment strategies revealed the desperation, each caliphate promising what it couldn't deliver: paradise on earth, perfect justice, divine guidance in human form. The promises grew more extravagant as reality grew more sordid. Young believers arrived expecting glory, found only the usual corruptions wearing religious costume. Financial systems told the truth when everything else lied. Follow the money through any caliphate, from public treasury to private pleasure, from religious taxes to personal palaces, from charity collections to foreign bank accounts. The flow patterns never change. Wealth concentrates, power corrupts, systems collapse. The mathematics are inescapable. Even the architecture exposed the contradictions. Public spaces designed for prayer and private chambers built for pleasure. Secret passages connecting what shouldn't connect. Hidden rooms containing what shouldn't exist. The physical structures embodied the philosophical splits. Buildings with multiple personalities, just like their inhabitants. The artistic productions grew more desperate over time. Early caliphates created beauty despite restrictions. Later ones produced propaganda disguised as art. The aesthetic sense withered when forced to serve ideology. Beauty requires freedom. Truth demands honesty. Neither survived in systems built on fundamental dishonesty. Language itself became casualty. Words lost meaning through overuse. Sacred became synonym for profitable. Divine will meant personal desire. Justice translated as revenge. When language serves deception, communication becomes impossible. The Tower of Babel rebuilt in every palace, everyone speaking different languages while using the same words. The medical knowledge gained through suffering, physicians learning to treat wounds from torture, developing antidotes for poisons used in succession battles, creating drugs to maintain sanity in insane systems. The healing arts perverted to enable continued sickness, every advancement shadowed by its dark purpose. Time acceleration marked each decline. The Umayyads lasted 90 years. The Abbasids maintained real power for perhaps 2 centuries. ISIS measured its existence in months. The pattern speeds up, each iteration burning brighter and faster. The contradictions that took decades to destroy early caliphates now operate in internet time. Children raised in these systems never knew normal. Their baseline included public piety and private vice, official truth and experienced reality. The cognitive dissonance programmed from birth. They grew into adults incapable of distinguishing authentic from performed, truth from propaganda, faith from politics. The psychological damage passed through generations like genetic mutation. The end always came from within. Not conquering armies, not external pressure, internal collapse. The contradictions finally too heavy to bear, the lies too numerous to track, the hypocrisies too blatant to ignore. Systems built on fundamental dishonesty contain their own destruction. The only variable is timing. Which brings us back to Baghdad, 1258, where this pattern would play out in the most devastating way possible. Hooves thundered against silk carpet as Mongol warriors circled their prize. February 20th, 1258. The same scene that opened this journey now carried new weight. Al-Mustasim's fingers still clawed at Persian wool, but now we understood why. The contradictions of his reign had led directly to this moment. Wine stains on palace floors told one story. Secret gatherings in hidden chambers whispered another. The carpet muffled more than screams. It absorbed centuries of hypocrisy that had rotted the caliphate from within. Each thread held memories of caliphs who preached water while drinking wine, rulers who enforced orthodoxy by day and chased forbidden pleasures after dark. The Mongols weren't just executing a man, they were suffocating a system that had already been choking on its own lies. Smoke billowed from the House of Wisdom while inside the palace, evidence burned in different fires. Servants rushed to destroy proof of the caliph's private life. Wine cellars were sealed. Poetry collections vanished into flames. The dancing girls' quarters stood empty, their occupants fled or hidden. Everything that contradicted the public image had to disappear before the conquerors discovered the truth. But truth has a way of surviving. Hidden in the palace walls were documents that revealed the full scope of Al-Mustasim's double life, not just wine and women. Financial records showing diverted religious taxes, funding personal pleasures, letters arranging theological debates that questioned Islam's foundations, contracts with Christian merchants for forbidden goods. The paperwork of hypocrisy, too valuable to destroy, too dangerous to preserve. The Mongol general Hulagu knew exactly what he would find. His spies had reported everything months before the siege. The weakness wasn't in Baghdad's walls, but in its leadership's soul. A caliph who stumbled through morning prayers, still drunk from the previous night's revels, couldn't inspire resistance. Soldiers who watched their leader violate every principle wouldn't die defending those principles. Al-Mustasim had inherited more than a throne. He'd inherited centuries of accumulated contradiction. Each predecessor had pushed boundaries further. What started as private wine drinking in Umayyad Damascus had evolved into systematic hypocrisy, secret laboratories, hidden pleasure chambers, theological debates that undermined the faith they claimed to protect. By the time leadership reached Al-Mustasim, the foundation was already sand. The treasury records told their own story. Public funds meant for infrastructure had built underground wine cellars. Money collected as religious tax furnished rooms for forbidden entertainments. The mathematics of corruption were simple. Every dinar spent on private vice was one stolen from public virtue. The ledgers balanced perfectly. The moral accounts were bankrupt. His death marked more than dynastic change. It symbolized the collapse of a system that had tried to serve two masters: divine law and human desire, public orthodoxy and private freedom. The tension had finally snapped, not from external pressure but internal contradiction. The Mongols were merely the instruments. The real executioner was the weight of accumulated lies. In those final moments beneath the carpet, Al-Mustasim might have remembered the warnings. Advisors who'd counseled reform, scholars who'd predicted disaster, military commanders who'd begged for resources wasted on palace pleasures. All ignored in favor of another cup, another night, another secret gathering that pushed the boundaries of acceptability further into darkness. The parallel to modern collapses seems obvious. Leaders who preach one thing while practicing another. Systems that maintain public facades while private corruption spreads like cancer. Technology changes, but human nature remains constant. The same weaknesses that brought down the Abbasids threaten every structure built on fundamental dishonesty. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. But religious absolute power creates a special kind of corruption. When men claim divine authority for human desires, The damage goes beyond normal political failure. It poisons the very concepts of truth, justice, and faith. The recovery takes generations. Sometimes it never comes. The Mongols didn't invent the violence they brought to Baghdad. They simply concentrated what had been dispersed throughout the Caliphate. Brother had been killing brother for succession. Mothers had been poisoning rivals. The harems had been battlegrounds. The only difference was scale and efficiency. The barbarians at the gate were no more barbaric than the civilized men within. As the horses continued their deadly circles, other sounds filled the air. The House of Wisdom crackling in flames, centuries of accumulated knowledge turning to ash, mathematical treatises that had advanced human understanding, medical texts that had saved countless lives, philosophical works that had challenged and enriched Islamic thought, all consumed by fire that made no distinction between sacred and profane. The destruction was selective in its own way. The Mongols saved what they valued. Chinese advisors identified texts worth preserving. Persian administrators rescued financial records. But the specifically Islamic scholarship, the works that had tried to reconcile faith with reason, burned brightest, as if the universe itself was erasing the evidence of impossible contradictions. In distant provinces, governors received the news with mixed emotions: shock at the symbolic loss, relief at the practical freedom. No more tribute to Baghdad, no more pretending to follow distant orders. The fragmentation that had been unofficial became undeniable. Each region would chart its own course, create its own version of Islamic authority. The multiplication of truths that al-Mustasim's death enabled would echo through centuries. The Caliph's family suffered fates worse than death. Sons sold into slavery, daughters distributed among Mongol commanders. The harem system that had promised protection became a distribution mechanism for human spoils. The women who'd spent lives preparing for one man's pleasure now served conquerors who didn't even speak their language. The irony was sharp as any Mongol blade. Survivors would later debate whether al-Mustasim's end was divine punishment or historical inevitability. The pious saw God's judgment on corruption. The cynical saw predictable results of systemic failure. Both were right in their own ways. When human systems violate their stated principles consistently enough, collapse becomes both deserved and unavoidable. The physical destruction was easier to measure than the psychological impact. Buildings could be rebuilt, libraries restocked, governments replaced. But the loss of faith in the very concept of religious authority, that damage went deeper than any Mongol sword could reach. If God's supposed representatives on earth lived like al-Mustasim, what did that say about the entire system? Future caliphates would learn the wrong lessons. Instead of addressing the contradictions, they'd hide them better, develop more sophisticated hypocrisies, create theological justifications for any behavior. The pattern would repeat with ISIS, with every group claiming divine mandate while practicing human vice. Technology evolved. Human nature didn't. The carpet finally stilled. Al-Mustasim's struggles ceased. The last Abbasid Caliph of Baghdad died as he had lived, surrounded by luxury that couldn't save him, suffocated by the very symbols of his power. The Mongols moved on to other destruction. But the questions raised by his life and death would haunt Islamic civilization forever. In the smoking ruins of the House of Wisdom, a few texts survived in hidden caches, works that documented the glorious contradictions of the Caliphate age, the scientific advances funded by wine-drinking rulers, the philosophical breakthroughs enabled by heretical discussions, the medical knowledge gained through forbidden dissections. Evidence that human progress often comes not from purity, but from the messy intersections of the sacred and profane. Perhaps that's the real tragedy. Not that the Caliphs failed to live up to impossible standards, but that in trying to maintain the fiction of perfection, they destroyed the very real achievements their imperfection had enabled. The libraries burning in Baghdad contained proof that civilization advances through contradiction, not despite it. That wisdom, like the last caliph, suffocated under the weight of its own covering. The ashes of that wisdom still drift through history, each new movement claiming to restore pure Islam, each one carrying the same seeds of contradiction that destroyed their predecessors. The cycle continues because the fundamental problem remains unsolved: how to reconcile human nature with divine ambition, how to build systems that acknowledge rather than deny this tension. Until that reconciliation comes, the hoofbeats echo through time. The carpet waits for its next victim. The fire seeks new libraries to consume. And somewhere, another caliph drinks forbidden wine while composing public prayers, unaware that history's judgment gallops toward him through the darkness, swift and certain as Mongol horses on silk carpet.